Dr. Jackie's here, changing life loving you. Yeah, that's the groove, life loving you. Feel the truth, move, life loving you. It's all we do, come on through, it's just for you.
I have on set with me today Russell Tomlinson. And Russell, we're going to tackle a really important question. A lot of couples are in trouble today, and they're in trouble because they've gotten into circular arguments. So that's where you create a cycle where there's a problem, and as the couple's trying to tackle the problem, it's almost like one person's reaction spars the other person, and then they complete a cycle of the wrong sort of a response. And it just goes around in a cycle.
Yeah.
And so they're never able to make any progress. They just keep arguing about the same old thing, almost different situations, but they're both locked in positions and unable to find a place of meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
So what do you want to share about circularity? Because the funny thing about it to me is that it's almost like the relationship could be good. Everything could be good,
Yeah.
except that one thing.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that one thing that you try to get that person to alter for you.
Yeah.
Because it's driving you crazy.
Yeah.
And they just can't seem to make that little adjustment.
Yeah. Well, number one, pride is in the middle of that. Somebody don't want to be wrong. And if there's an argument at the end of the day, somebody's going to be wrong. So somebody has to get rid of their pride, one or the other, whether it's the husband or the wife, the pride has to go. The second thing is that we've got to also consider that being right is overrated.
I like that.
You won't be right in every argument that you have. That's why it's an argument. Somebody's jockeying, somebody's positioning to try to show that they are right. So the best way to be able to avoid that kind of situation is, first of all, you've got to put your pride to the side. That takes, it takes a real man or a real woman to do that. And the other thing is, you've got to say, look, I know how to admit when I'm wrong.
But now you're saying that and you're leaning forward while you're saying it.
Yeah.
It sounds good on paper, but talk to the men, because you believe that that's a harder position to take for a man than it is for a woman?
Probably is, because many men see themselves as leaders. Some call them the head of the household. And a lot of times they believe that just because they are the head, that many of the wives or women are just going to bow down to their position. And women have a position also that they want to share. And so if you're really the leader or you're really the head, what has to happen next is you've got to learn how to lead when it comes to discipline. In other words, you've got to show discipline in the conversation. You can't force your opinion on anybody. So somebody has to step back, show discipline, listen, admit they're wrong, and at the end of the day, it's easier to deal with.
But you know, the funny thing is that there's usually always one person in the relationship that's more able to acquiesce. It's that person that's always the first one to say sorry.
Yeah.
Always the one that's usually coming up with the solutions.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know. I think about that, and sometimes what I hear from couples is that, you know, it's not fair. I'm always the one.
The one that's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, or I'm always the one that has to say sorry.
Yeah.
And I think that we as women, we kind of accept more that it's harder for the man, and we kind of make some allowances.
Yeah. Yeah.
What should we be doing?
Well, there has to be a mutual agreement. First of all, every couple should write down something by way of knowing how to fight fair. Arguments are going to come. Disagreements are going to happen. But the thing is, there has to be an agreement when there's peace, when there's nothing going on that's negative, nobody's arguing. Talk while things are going well.
So I look at centrifugal force,
Yeah.
which is where you have a motion, an
Yeah.
object in motion.
Yeah.
And sometimes it won't stop until something goes
Yeah.
in to break that motion.
Yeah, and that's why I was saying, for instance, say that couple has a date night. Generally on a date night, everybody is at ease, everybody is calm, they're looking to enjoy themselves. Okay, that's when you want to talk about, okay, at some point we may have a disagreement. Let's agree now how we're going to handle it so that when the disagreement comes, we'll be able to have guidelines that we can follow that will keep us from experiencing this circular argument that we're talking about.
But something has to break it.
Right.
And what I find that with couples, those that are having, as you say, irreconcilable differences, the
Yeah.
reason why they're getting divorced, or the reason why they're breaking apart, is because they have not been able to find a solution.
Yeah.
If it was that easy that we could just sit and talk, and I want people watching to listen and hear, see themselves, see some situations that they've been dealing with, and understand that these are some steps that you can take to remedy your problem.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing that I noticed. You could have a good relationship, everything could be going well, but it's like these pumps that I'm wearing. They look good, don't they?
They look great.
Yeah, yeah. But now if I got a little pebble in that shoe, I'm walking well in the shoe, I get this little pebble in there.
Yeah.
I start to get a little irritation, a little discomfort.
Yeah.
But the more I keep walking with that pebble in that shoe, it eventually begins to break down the skin.
That's right.
And then before you know it, I'm limping, I'm in pain.
Yeah.
And then it festers and gets infected.
Yeah.
All from this one little thing.
Yeah.
Shoe was lovely, everything was going well, but that one thing left unaddressed can just spoil everything.
Yeah.
That's what happens in circular arguing.
Right.
They have a great relationship, the relationship's pretty good. That one pebble gets into the shoe.
Yeah.
And they're unable to break the cycle to get that pebble removed. And then you have this beautiful relationship that begins to dissolve simply because they've been unable to break the cycle and to find resolve.
Yeah.
So that's really what I want to share, because this is the reason why so many people today are not together, because they got into something. I remember my accountant, great man, had 5 children, everything, gets caught up in a situation, they get divorced. And then he was talking to me one day. This is a grown man, and I love when men share their emotions, because I am so against how society has kind of labeled them to being non-emotional. We're all emotional creatures.
We are.
But he broke down and he said, you know, he says, my wife used to ask me to do this and so, and I could never do it. Now we're divorced. Now I'm with this new wife, and now I'm doing it. And he started to cry. He says, why couldn't I do it then? Look at the cost.
Yeah.
5 children disjointed. Broken home.
Yeah.
He lost the relationship with one of the sons. They don't even speak anymore. And he knew that he kind of really did hinder his first wife's progress through that divorce. She didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
So he's crying, asking me, why couldn't I do it then? Circular arguing.
Yeah. And of course, that's where, again, that's where the pride factor comes in.
I believe you.
That's where the pride factor comes in. There are a number of solutions to this, but the main thing is this: somebody has to humble themselves.
So how do we make that happen?
Well, you've got to be secure to say you're wrong. Most people that are insecure can never say that they're wrong, because their security depends on how they are received, or rather, maybe a better word is this: rejected. And because of that fear of rejection, there's an insecurity there. So we would rather argue rather than say that we're wrong.
Well, you know, I'm not gonna even lie. When I was first married, my first 7 years, I used to argue to win. And I would go to all costs to win.
We all like to win.
And, you know, I finally kind of got my senses about me, because it's like, you're gonna bite off your nose to spite your face.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you win if you're in a winning relationship.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to say.
That's
you
good.
win
That's good.
when you're in a winning relationship. I win when I come home to my castle and I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I win when I raise a successful family.
Yeah.
That's winning.
Well, I think another issue, and you bring up a good point, another issue is this: if you win, what have you won? If you won the argument, but maybe you lost a level of respect in the relationship.
Oh, I love that. Now that's good.
So people that win at any cost always end up losing something. I figure if I'm going to fight, the first thing, we're going to argue, we're going to have a disagreement. The first thing that I want to ask myself is this: what am I going to gain? What am I going to be paid for this? If I'm just out to win the argument, I may have won the argument, but I've lost trust in a long-term relationship.
You've also lost time, because probably about 30, 40 minutes went by with y'all arguing.
That's right.
Going around in circles.
That's exactly
You
right.
lost some sleep late at night because you know that woman probably kept you up. Nobody was getting sleep. And I remember when I was first married, Russell, I used to tell my husband, if mama's not happy, no one in the house is happy.
Well, we still say that today.
And it's true.
We still say that today.
Now, I love that because I was just saying how couples usually think that they've maybe made a mistake and married the wrong person.
Yeah.
Because the very tumultuous years are going to be those first 2 years of marriage. The first
Generally.
one, the worst.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a perfect solution because they're getting counseling and assistance and support while they're trying to learn how to meld together.
Absolutely.
So that's a really good recipe for success.
Yeah.
But we also want couples to know that it's normal that it's difficult to get along during that time.
Well, here's the issue. One of the things that people tend to do is put more emphasis and focus on compatibility. And that's good at the beginning stages of the relationship. But you really cannot build a strong relationship on compatibility. You
Now,
probably...
wait a minute now. I totally disagree with you on that now.
Okay.
That's my whole premise is compatibility. What I will agree with you on. Compatibility in the beginning stages, you have to find someone that's compatible with you.
Yeah.
Less struggle, less strife if you're alike. If I'm trying to get along with somebody who has very dissimilar beliefs and direction, it's going to be harder.
No.
But I agree with you about the compatibility piece as you begin to mature and evolve.
Yeah.
You're not the same person anymore.
But I'll tell you why I said that.
Tell me.
Compatibility is the early stages of the relationship. Of course, that's the attraction. We all need to be compatible in order just to come together. But here's the issue. The longer you're married, you'll have more differences than your compatibilities. And that's why it's better to learn how to handle the differences, because who struggles with compatibility? That's where we get along.
Oh, I see. You're framing it. I got it.
Yeah.
We're saying the same thing then.
Yeah.
We're really saying the same thing from different perspectives. So I'm saying
Exactly.
that the more compatible you are. So I'm saying the more compatible you are, the easier it is for you to get along.
Yeah.
Versus trying to get along with someone that's very dissimilar.
Yeah.
But you still are you're not gonna be a perfect match. So you gotta learn how to deal with those differences that do exist, because there's still gonna be a lot of differences.
Exactly. In fact, I was looking at some statistics the other day. Come to find out, 60% of all divorces come under the heading of irreconcilable differences. So compatibility couldn't hold it together. It's the differences where people struggle. Now, if I understand how to go about negotiating and navigating our differences, then I have an opportunity to experience a happy long-term relationship.
That's right. Because we don't break up because we're happy.
That's
we
right.
break up because of the issues that arise that make us unhappy.
Exactly. And so the compatibility issue is great. I just say it's overrated. You know, we have to have those compatibilities. They attract us, they draw us together. In fact, that is our strength. But the longer you're married, the more you're going to discover that the differences start to outweigh those areas where we're compatible.
Well, because it's the little stone in the shoe.
Yeah.
It's the little stone in the shoe.
And a lot of differences, yeah.
So, and what I find is I don't really have a lot of differences with my husband. That's the funny thing. We're very compatible. I find that I say he's like my twin. But it's the small little things, those few differences that make up all the difference.
Yeah.
So listen, I'm happy or sad based on the few small differences, that little stone in the shoe thing.
Yeah.
And so what advice can you give to couples about how to break that cycle? We're talking about, an outside force coming in. So we know that counseling could be one. Having a third voice that is a mediator to kind of help you to see each other's side. That's one solution.
That's one, yeah.
What's another one?
Well, you need, again, you need that ongoing counseling. But the other thing goes right back to what we spoke about earlier. It goes back to this issue of pride. Somebody said this, pride leads to destruction.
Oh, I agree.
And if it's in a marriage, if it's in a business, whatever pride is involved in, eventually there's going to be destruction there. If you love your spouse enough, then pride can be put to the side. But it has to be a love of the someone of someone else other than just loving yourself. Loving yourself is important, but we sacrifice for other people when we love them and when we care about them. And that's why it's important for us then to say, you know what, look, I'm wrong, I'm gonna put, I'll accept it, I'm gonna improve. It's the best way to kill an argument, to apologize and to say I'm wrong. What is there to argue about?
Well, there's nothing anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So,
until you don't do what you just apologized. Oh, sorry. Until
Okay.
you do again what you just apologized for.
Right. Now, that's where accountability comes in. Somebody has to be held accountable. And maybe the couple themselves can hold each other accountable when somebody breaks a promise or goes back to an old way of some type of self-defeating behavior. But the issue is, at least there's an agreement for some kind of accountability, just to be sure that once this thing comes around again, here's the circular thing again, if it comes around again, we've got a plan in place now to handle it. We know how to deal with it.
So let's give this scenario that you're a couple and you've had circular arguing for a long time. You've now had this outside influence to kind of help you to establish some new behaviors.
Yeah.
So you've made a commitment that you're going to make these particular adjustments. What happens when they're not made? They still aren't made even after you've had that outside assistance.
Yeah. Here's what I tell couples when I counsel them. The biggest project that you have in a marriage is yourself.
And that's true.
Somebody is not working on themselves, and we spend a lot of time trying to improve the other person or somehow get them in a frame of mind where, they begin to act the way we want them to act. So we're responsible as an individual. I'm responsible for myself, improving myself. I can assist my spouse, in areas that they want to improve, but they've got to be willing. But when it comes to having a marriage that's solid, it starts when you begin to deal with yourself and improve yourself and better yourself. Then you're capable of helping the marriage to improve. But if there's no self-maintenance there, it's going to be difficult.
It will.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering now as I'm listening and thinking, because there's so many men, I think we're talking about decades and decades of these normative views that we have to kind of penetrate and break down before men can really come to a conversation and come to a relationship feeling like they can really lower the guard. Listen, if they can't even cry in the confines of their own home, you're talking about now that you want them to disrobe and not be prideful and say that they're sorry.
Yeah.
I want to take it a little bit further, though. Is there anything in particular that you would say to a man to help them in that process of disrobing with this woman that they love?
Yeah. Well, men have to know themselves. We get to somehow try to know our spouse's position, our wife's position. But eventually, what has to happen is you've got to turn attention on yourself and deal with the issues that you know about. At least begin to deal with the fact that, look, I may have a problem communicating with my spouse. I may have a problem opening up. What is that about? Well, if the wife cannot help, or maybe, you don't want her advice.
That's what I was going to ask. So you wouldn't mind your wife giving you her advice or trying to use her skills to help you?
Yeah, some men won't because of their pride. But there's always outside help for that. Because if you're dealing with you've got to make your issues your focus, not the issues that's supposedly hindering the marriage. So I've got to fix me. I always tell people, in our marriage vows, better or worse, rich or poor, sickness and in health, till death us do part.
They knew what they were writing in those vows, didn't they?
They knew
for
what
better or for worse.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Because the better is usually before the I do.
That's right.
And then you start to see a lot of the worse after the I do.
Absolutely.
But it's really the truth. Why? But it's natural. The person is now, they're at one with you.
That's right.
So they're 100% authentic.
But here's the issue. Once we give those vows or receive those vows, the issue is my spouse is not responsible for my happiness. I've got to bring happiness to the table, you know, as a part of my own personal self-maintenance. Because if I wait on somebody else to make me happy, that means that I'm no longer in control of my own life.
Exactly. No, and you're also not being responsible because you're making somebody else responsible for you. When only you should be really responsible for yourself. It's a shared responsibility with your mate.
Yeah.
You know, I want to turn the conversation now to men of color. You know, I've heard it said that black males, just because of the issues of slavery and, you know, oppression and racism, that they struggle so much just in their daily lives. When I was doing my doctorate, I remember that in the peer-reviewed journals, they stated that the black male is the most endangered species on the planet.
I believe that.
And they were talking about the stressors. So all of these researchers are just looking at these markers in their lives and what happens to them usually around the age of about 7 or 8, how they feel this, I guess, the impinging of all of these societal issues plaguing them and sort of pinning them down.
Yeah.
And as I thought about that and the relationship to male and female relationships, I wanted to kind of talk about, do you feel that black males have a more difficult time with their pride, in love with their woman, being able to disrobe and to become more vulnerable and less shielded because of, you know, the historical facts of their existence?
Yeah, I won't discount that. I think that that's a part of the problem, a part of the issue. I think there's a larger problem, though, apart from pride. Sometimes when it comes to relationships, we actually mimic what we've learned, what we've seen coming up. That may be the hardest thing to break, because if you've seen dysfunction, as an example, you've lived in dysfunction, generally you carry on that dysfunction.
Because it's all you know.
Exactly.
And I always say that people cannot recreate what they've not seen. You either have to have seen it in your life or in your mind's eye.
That's
and those
right.
are the only things that we can create.
Yeah.
What was the song? If I can see it, then I can believe it.
Yeah.
I believe I can fly.
Yeah, yeah.
And so a lot of the things that we have purposed for ourselves in our life don't take flight because we've not seen it.
Exactly,
one way or the other.
exactly. So now we come to a place of mentoring. We come to a place of fathers. We come to a place having men in our lives to actually model and demonstrate what it's like to be a real responsible man. Now, the good news is that we have more information today than ever before. You can Google anything now.
I say that all the time.
There are books that are out there. There are all kinds of resources that are out there that can help men to be men.
On your
because
smartphone.
nobody grows up with everything in place. There are some struggles, there are issues, there are walls to climb, things to get over. But at some point, as a man, the biggest deal is simply taking responsibility for where you are and who you are, not blame parents, not blame society, not blame slavery. Take responsibility as an individual, because you had no control over those other things. But the only person you really have control over is you. And when you take that kind of responsibility, now you're on your way to real manhood.
Yes, I agree. Responsibility and then action.
Yeah.
What do you think is your secret power as a man?
The secret power for me would be, and I think for all men, is the ability to respond. That's all responsibility is. It's the ability to respond to whatever issue I'm dealing with in life. And again, that come through mentoring, having a father, having a father figure, whatever the case may be, reading, wanting to improve yourself. That's what happens. So if I have the ability to respond the right way, regardless of what the issue might be, then I'm on my way to being a better man.
Oh, I love that. And that's a really good note to finish on. Being a good man.
Yeah, at least striving for it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Hey, Dr. Jacquie here. I'm your how-to lady. How to do life, how to do love, and how to do you, boo. So click, like, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more to come.